Hello there. Welcome to episode 9 of Data Analysis with Excel. It's been a wonderful journey so far. We are almost halfway through our journey from beginner to advanced level in Excel. In this episode, we will talk about pivot charts. Where do I start? Well, today we'll be turning data into beautiful dynamic charts in just few clicks. No formulas, no stress, and by the end of this video, you will know how to build interactive visual dashboards using pivot charts. Let's get into it. So I've prepared a very small data set for our hands-on experiment with pivot chart. We have a date, a region, the product, units sold, and revenue. If you remember, in our previous video, we talked about pivot tables. And I said pivot tables and pivot charts are siblings, they go together. So wherever you see pivot chart, yes, there's pivot table. You cannot see pivot charts without pivot tables. So before we can visualize, we need to generate our pivot table to be able to get our beautiful visualizations. Okay, at the end of this video, you'll be able to create a pivot table like what we did in the previous section and pivot chart from raw data like what we have here. Customize the chart types, the labels, the layout. You'll be able to add slices for the interactive filtering. You'll be able to update your chart instantly when new data set is added. You can also avoid common mistakes beginners normally do. Okay, so we are going to begin with our pivot table. So you click anywhere in the data, you move to insert, click on pivot table. So we normally create a new worksheet for the pivot table. So a new worksheet, and the cell range is from A1 to E11. Press OK. Quickly rename our sheet to pivot. Okay. So now we have our pivot sheet. We can begin. So we need a pivot table before we can create our pivot chart. So pivot chart is simply a chart that is linked to a pivot table. Yes, that means it can summarize, it can group, and also visualize large amounts of data dynamically without writing any line of code or formula with respect to Excel formula. You can just drag and drop, select, and now you get a very nice visualization for your pivot table. So let's quickly begin the pivot table building so that we can advance to the pivot chart. So we have here our columns. We can drag regions to rows, okay, to see the various regions we have in our work and the products sold in each region to the columns, right? So we have coffee, we have pastry, and we have tea. Then we can talk about the revenue generated as our values for every product and then region. So we have this nice pivot table telling us that in the East region, the revenue generated for coffee is 550. For the North region, we have 600, South 1000, and West 900. Come to pastries, we have them. We have their totals and then the grand total. So this is a very nice pivot table generated. A table showing total revenue by region. So the sum of the revenues, okay, is the total revenue per each region. So when you come back to our sheet, you can see that north, we have coffee there, same north, we have tea, and then last north, we have pastries. Okay, so all these values sum up to the 3050 as the total revenue for coffee throughout the 4 regions. When you go this way horizontally, we have the total revenue generated from East region by the sales of coffee, pastry, and tea, giving us 1500. So we now have our pivot table. We can introduce our pivot chart. So you click anywhere. Remember, the mistake a beginner will do is by clicking outside the pivot table. You have to click inside the pivot table to be able to add a pivot chart. You come to analyze. When you come to analyze, we have pivot table tools analyze. You see pivot chart at the right side, top right side. When we click on it, as we discussed previously in visualizations, we talked about a lot of charts and graphs, and you have to know when to use a type of graph that will suit your work very well. So in this particular episode, going with a clustered column chart will be the best for you. So you click OK. You can adjust it to wherever you want. So we have a pivot chart for our pivot table, which shows the regions. Okay, we have east, north, south, and west. We have the products here: coffee, pastry, tea. And now the values here represent the sum of the revenue. Alright, so we can add some titles to it and say, oh, yeah, region. And so name this as the revenue. Alright, you can add some grid lines if you want. It all depends on how you want your work to be. And now we come here. This is the overall style. Okay, you choose your preferred design. Yes, I think I'll go with this. Can change the colors and know maybe when you're working for an industry where they have their chosen primary colors or their colors they use in presentation, you just make use of those colors so that it can match with their preference. Sometimes choosing your colors will determine whether your visualization will be presentable or accepted by your board. You have to make sure everything is nice, and then you are good to go. So now we have a simple visualization of our pivot table. So over here we see that east, the first bar is for coffee, the second bar is for pastry, and the last bar is for tea. So east has the values here, north, south. South has no T, and we see it over here as well. The T column has blank spaces at south and west. That's why you have only 2 bars over here. So remember, whatever happens here also takes effect in our pivot chart. Okay, so now we can try to add the slices. Okay, so the slices is going to bring the interaction between our pivot chart, pivot tables, without going back to make changes to the actual data set. So let's make it more useful by adding the interactive feature. So you come to analyze again, and we have insert slicer. We click on insert slicer. You can choose by date, depends on what you're looking for, by product. Okay, so I want to be able to check on the first day of January, the first day of March, and the first day of February what happened. That's I'm adding a date to it. I also want to know product wise, maybe I'm looking at only pastry, I'm looking at only tea, I'm looking at only coffee. That's I'm adding the products to. So when I click OK, we see 2 new output. So we can bring this to the front, and now we basically adjust it to suit the other. So the moment we change something here, our pivot chart changes drastically. So now I selected coffee for the product slicer. So the chart is only showing me the coffee, and I can see that, okay, so South region is having more. Can you all see that? Yes. The longer the bar, the higher the revenue. I can select pastry, and immediately I see different thing. I can select tea, and I'll see different thing. We can also do a combination of product and date. Okay, so on this date, how was the coffee performance? The coffee revenue. On this date, how was the pastry? Okay, on this date, how was the tea? Like that. So I can choose coffee, and now choose maybe 1st of January. I can do combination and choose 1st of February. Okay, and we have that. You can add 1st of March, and you have that as well. So you can only select March, and we see that it was east and south that had some revenue generated on coffee. So this is making our work very nice and easy. You don't need to go back and clear your pivot tables and do some filtering. You can use the slices to just select the tabs you want, and it will automatically take effect in the pivot chart. Okay, so let's see how we update our values. Let's say our actual data now has some new input, say 1st of March, sorry, April 2024. Okay, and we have, let's say, South, and it was pastry. Unit sold was 90, and then revenue, say 400. Okay, so 1st of March again. Am I repeatedly saying March? So 1st of April 2024, we have East. We should follow the formatting. So capital E, capital S. And we have T, episode 100. We had 540. And lastly, 1st of April, West. We have coffee, episode 120. And we had 660. Okay, so we have this new added data. Okay, we want it to take effect in our pivot table and pivot chart. So when we click on this, we come to analyze. We see refresh. So this refresh allows the pivot table to go back to the old data and check if there have been new data added. If so, and it adds it to the work. So you click on this refresh or refresh. Since you have multiple stuff, we choose refresh all. You can also try to change the data source. Now add the new ones to it. Okay, this is the reason why when we were trying to refresh, we didn't see the new changes. Okay, so our data source was out to here, and these ones came outside the given range. If I were to make changes inside the given range, then we were safe. But I added it after the already selected. That's why when I refreshed, we didn't see anything. So now you change the data table or range, and now the effect as shown here where we have 1st of April. All right. So basically, we have been able to apply pivot charts to pivot tables where we added sliders for interactive viewing. At the end of our video, we have made a great progress from episode 1 to episode 9. So, without much ado, I'll briefly recap something small on what we did today. So the key takeaways: pivot charts turn raw data into interactive visuals. Always remember to build pivot table first, followed by pivot chart. Use slices to filter chart dynamically, and also refresh after updating the data. And if the updated data is outside the given range you did already, you have to change your data source and now select the new data added to your work so that it can have effect on the pivot table and pivot chart. Great job! We have mastered pivot charts, one of Excel's most powerful visualization tools. In our next video, we'll be talking about lookups, where we have the V lookups, the X lookups, and the H lookups, where they're all built on the V lookups. The X lookups and the H lookups are all built upon the V lookups. See you in our next video. Bye.